The CH-47 Chinook plunged hard into a frozen Afghan valley, its massive rotors ripping through the night until the entire airframe vibrated like it might come apart at the seams. Red cabin lights bled across exposed steel ribs, harness lines, and armored silhouettes. Breath turned to fog with every exhale. Cold forced its way in through cracks no seal could fully stop. Creeping into gloves, masks, and bone, Mara Ellison sat along the bench with the others. Silent, posture locked in, shoulders squared. Her gloved hands moved through her medical kit with calm precision. Gauze, chest seals, needles. Each item checked once. Then checked again. Not from nerves, but from habit. As if time itself was something she could count, label, and control. Tyler Knox leaned in close enough to be heard over the engines, his mouth curling into a smirk. "Just the nurse tonight," he said. The word was light, dismissive, tossed out like it carried no weight. A few of the men laughed. The sound was easy, automatic, already fading as their attention drifted elsewhere. Ellison didn't respond. She didn't look at them. Her gaze stayed fixed past the red glow, past the men, past the aircraft itself, into the open black mouth of the ramp. She measured distance, wind, drop, as if those things mattered more than opinions. Senior Chief Daniel Halverson noticed her calm. It wasn't right for someone labeled support. It wasn't fear. It wasn't tension. It was calculation. The ramp light snapped green. Somewhere below, answers waited for questions no one had asked yet. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true stories of courage. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. Mara Ellison wasn't what people expected to see on a night like this. Late 30s, average height, lean, but not the polished kind you build in front of mirrors. Her body was shaped by distance, weight, repetition, and refusal to quit. Her hair was pinned tight beneath her helmet. Her face carried no warmth meant to soothe, but it held no anger either. Just stillness. A kind that made the chaos around her feel temporary. When she spoke, it was low and precise. No wasted syllables. Every word chosen, like she knew the price of breath. Most of the time, she didn't speak at all. She listened, she observed. She waited. The Navy SEALs around her were built differently. Even quiet, they carried noise. Weapons were checked with fast, confident motions. Shoulders bumped. Short jokes passed between them. Gloves tapped knees like they were keeping themselves awake. Their energy filled the cabin like heat. Ellison didn't match it. She wore the same armor, the same plates, the same night gear, but the patch on her sleeve marked her as medical. That alone drew a line in their thinking. No one said it outright, but it lived in the way conversations moved around her instead of through her. Support, not shooter. Her rank sat small on her chest, easy to miss under red light. No one snapped to attention when she moved. No one asked for her input when routes were discussed. She had no chest-out authority, no voice raised to claim space. She carried herself like someone who didn't require permission to be there. That was why they misjudged her. Tyler Knox, already amused by himself, decided she was an easy target. He wasn't openly cruel. That would have been simpler. He was casual. Disrespect delivered like background noise. He never called her weak, never called her useless. He just spoke around her, like her role was obvious and didn't need explanation. "Keep the bandages ready," Knox said at one point, not even turning his head. "When things kick off, we'll need you in the back." A couple of men smiled. One let out a short snort. The kind of laugh people allow themselves when they think the truth is on their side. Ellison didn't react. She tightened a strap, checked her tourniquet placement, adjusted her kit like she hadn't heard a thing. Her eyes stayed forward. On the ramp. On the dark beyond. On what mattered. Lieutenant Commander Cole Raw stood near the front, braced against the sway of the aircraft. He looked like the mission itself. Hard jaw, sharp movements, calm carved from responsibility and repetition. He issued commands in short bursts. The men responded instantly. The rhythm of a team that had done this too often to romanticize it. Raw acknowledged. "Ellison, the way you acknowledge equipment, One nod, confirmation, no welcome. No introduction, as someone who counted. Just a check that the medic was present. Orders went to shooters, Knox, Pike, Moreno, Cross. Names with weight. Halverson moved through them like gravity. Senior enlisted presence. The kind that made even the loud ones quiet down without realizing why. Ellison received her instructions last. Almost casually. Rear element. Casualty collection, near the entry point. Treat, stabilize, keep them alive until movement. Yes, sir, she said. Her voice held no edge. No resentment. No protest, it held certainty. The Chinook dropped lower. Red light sharpened every face, carved intensity into every expression. Outside, the valley stretched like a bowl of ice and stone. Wind rolling through it like something alive. Ellison stared into it, and did something no one noticed. She counted, not aloud. Not with fingers. With her eyes, ramp angle. Drop distance. Descent rhythm. Time between commands. A habit, automatic. Like breathing. When the ramp went green, and the first man surged forward, she was already moving. Not late, not early. Perfectly timed. Like she felt the exact second the team would go. They hit the ground hard. Boots sank into frozen earth. Gravel scattered. Rotorwash slammed the valley. Then vanished as the aircraft disappeared into the night. Cold punched into their lungs. Roar raised a fist. The team dropped. Ellison was already down before the signal fully settled. Prone, rifle angled. Eyes scanning. Breath steady, no hesitation. No scramble. No adjustment. Knox glanced her way for half a second, then looked off again. It didn't fit his mental image, but he wasn't ready to fix that yet. They moved. The SEALs flowed through the terrain with practiced precision. Perfect spacing. Silent hand signals. Heads turning in coordinated arcs. Ellison moved with them, but never inside them. She stayed just off their lines. Near cover. Near terrain that could hide a body or stop a round. Not from fear. From thought. Arise ahead. Rock formation left. Broken wall blocking sightlines. Each time the team halted, she stopped where logic put her, not comfort. No one directed her. She didn't need it. Roar halted them near a low ridge. Sectors were assigned fast. Knox left, Pike right. Moreno rear. Cross on the compound approach. Halverson with Roar. Ellison received her final instruction like an afterthought. Stay close. If someone goes down, you move when I say yes, sir. Halverson watched her without making it obvious. Years had taught him how to see without staring. He noticed how she scanned terrain like an operator, not a medic. How her eyes marked choke points. How her breathing slowed when the wind shifted, like she'd learned to hear danger in weather. He saw restraint. Not ego, not a need to be seen. Something locked tight and controlled. The team didn't notice her isolation because she didn't acknowledge it. She didn't complain. Didn't shrink. Didn't act wounded by their indifference. She carried it like extra weight, heavy, familiar. Which meant she'd lived this before. The imbalance of respect sat in the cold with them, silent and real. Men who trusted each other with their lives were already deciding she wouldn't be tested the same way. Ellison stayed quiet. Eyes forward. Hands steady. She didn't defend herself. She didn't need to, not yet. The mission briefing had been delivered in the kind of voice that lowered shoulders without anyone noticing. Low risk, minimal contact. In and out before the valley woke up. That's how Lieutenant Commander Cole Roar had framed it. And the men accepted it like professionals do. No excitement. Just agreement. Routine. A compound. A short movement. A grab. A clean exfil before first light. That was the plan. The cold sharpened everything as they advanced. Each step landed with controlled pressure. Boots crunching softly over frozen dirt and scattered stone. Sounds swallowed by discipline. The valley walls rose on either side like massive shoulders, narrowing their movement into a tight corridor that pushed them forward whether they wanted to be or not. Breathing stayed measured. Weapons stayed low but ready. No one spoke unless the moment demanded it. Mara Ellison moved with them. Quiet, easy to overlook if you didn't know what to notice. She studied the ground the way other people studied expressions. The way snow piled unevenly against shattered walls. The way certain paths were too clean, untouched in a way that felt intentional. As if people avoided them without ever saying why. She tracked rooflines where dust sat wrong. Disturbed just enough to suggest someone had been waiting there not long ago. She didn't speak. Not because she doubted herself, but because the picture wasn't finished yet. The compound emerged slowly from the dark. Low perimeter walls, corrugated metal roofs, a tight cluster of buildings pressed together like they shared secrets they didn't want exposed. One entrance stood out immediately. Too clear, too open, too inviting. Raw raised a hand. The team froze, melting into the shadows. Night optics dropped into place. The world shifted into green shapes and measured distances. The compound was silent. No movement, no voices. Only wind threading through broken masonry. Minimal contact. Knox muttered under his breath. No one laughed. Ellison scanned again, slower this time. She counted windows. Tracked angles. Mapped where fire would come from if the quiet shattered. A sense of wrongness settled in her chest, heavy and pressurized. Like air before a storm, Raw made the call. Pike moved first, breaching the outer gate with controlled force. The sound was sharp, quick, swallowed by the night. The team flowed inside exactly as trained. Bodies stacked. Weapons carved clean arcs through doorways and corners. It was textbook. Rooms cleared. Targets neutralized. No alarms, no shouting. Just efficient, practiced violence. Ellison stayed where she'd been placed. Base of the entry stairs. Medical kit open. Rifle slung, but live. She tracked the team's progress by sound alone, matching voices to positions, building the layout in her head as they moved. Then it shattered. The first shots came from above, not from inside the compound, but from rooftops beyond it. Muzzle flashes sparked like brief stars in the dark, and rounds slammed into the courtyard from angles that shouldn't have existed. Evan Cross was exposed when it happened. One step forward. Then nothing. He dropped hard, body folding, blood spreading dark against pale dirt. The sound he made ended abruptly, swallowed by shock. The team reacted instantly. Return fire. Hands grabbing Cross, hauling him toward cover. Ellison was already there. She hit the ground beside him as another burst cracked overhead. Hands moving before her mind finished cataloging the damage. The wound was catastrophic. Massive bleeding. The kind that erased time. Tourniquet high. Tourniquet tight. Movements exact. Calm to the point of seeming unreal as chaos detonated. Around her dot, then the RPG struck. The blast ripped into the edge of the compound. Concussive force hammering bodies into walls. Teeth rattling, vision blurring. Concrete dust swallowed the air. Shrapnel screamed through space. The primary radio died instantly. Comes down. Someone yelled, "Dot." Another voice tried the backup. Only static answered. The night exploded into noise. Enemy fire poured in from rooftops and alley mouths. Coordinated now, deliberate. Traces stitched across the courtyard, forcing the team into cover they hadn't planned for. This wasn't random resistance, it was a trap, a killbox. Raw felt it land like a physical blow. He shouted orders, pulling the team inward, trying to consolidate positions as the compound transformed from controlled space into a cage. Knox fired back hard, aggression spiking as fear leaked through the cracks. His movements were fast, almost too fast. Discipline slipping as anger tried to cover the gap. This wasn't minimal. Contact. Ellison stayed locked on Cross. His breathing was shallow, color draining fast. She followed protocol without hesitation. Sealing wounds, pushing fluids, hands steady as rounds, smacked walls close enough to shower her in dust. A round snapped past her head. Close enough to move the air. She didn't flinch. Another seal was hit near the breach, shrapnel tearing into his leg. Someone shouted for the medic. Ellison finished stabilizing Cross enough to buy minutes, then moved. She dragged him by his kit straps into deeper cover, positioning him where incoming fire angles were weakest. She placed him like she'd already mapped it, like safety had been marked in advance. Raw noticed. He didn't yet understand why it mattered. The enemy pressed harder. Fire came in waves now, probing, testing. When the team shifted, the fire shifted with them. Someone out there was watching, coordinating, waiting. Ammo counts began to drop. Moreno reported he was hit. Voice calm, shoulder torn open, but functional. Pike took a glancing round to the helmet, staggered, shook it off. Still up, capability was bleeding away, inch by inch. Ellison moved between them, changing roles without announcement. One moment she was sealing wounds, tightening tourniquets. The next she was firing controlled shots at a rooftop position that exposed itself for a fraction too long. No one commented. There wasn't time. Knox looked at her again. Longer this time. He watched her fire once, reposition, fire again. Each shot deliberate. No panic. No waste. It didn't match the version of her he'd decided on. Enemy fire surged, then shifted, cutting off the main exit. Raw realized what was happening. They were being herded, forced deeper, inside. Whoever planned this wanted them tired, boxed in. Out of options. Cross groaned weakly behind cover. Ellison was at his side immediately, adjusting pressure, murmuring something low and steady. Not comfort. Control. His eyes met hers for a second. What he saw there wasn't pity. It was certainty. She wasn't letting him die if there was anything left to do. The team fell back into the structure. Concrete walls groaned under impact. Dust thickened the air, mixing with cordite and blood. Every sense screamed. This was where plans usually fractured. Where fear started making choices. Raw forced calm into his voice. But the clock was loud in his head now. No comes. No air. No clean exit. This was becoming a siege. Ellison finished another treatment and leaned back against the wall. Rifle up, eyes cutting through dust and motion. She had already accepted what the others were still processing. Waiting wouldn't save them. Knox shouted in frustration. Firing harder, faster, like volume could push the enemy back. Then he stopped. Drew breath. Forced control. Jaw tight with effort. The margin between surviving and dying was shrinking. Ellison edged closer to Raw, just enough to be heard. They're feeding fire from the north roof, she said quietly. When it pauses, they're repositioning. They'll hit the breach again in under a minute. Raw stared at her, surprised, despite himself. How do you know? He asked. She didn't answer. The pause came exactly when she said it would. What would you have done in that moment? Watching a plan dissolve under fire. Watching someone everyone underestimated move with impossible calm as the walls closed in. Pressure climbed, the enemy surged again. Closer now. Bolder. Inside the failing structure, the balance of respect was shifting. Whether anyone wanted to admit it or not. One wall partially collapsed, spilling rubble across the floor, tearing open a jagged gap where moonlight and gunfire poured in together. Dust choked the air, turning each breath into work. The team pulled inward, stacking where they could. Backs to cracked concrete. Weapons trained on angles that refused to stay quiet. Ammo counts were whispered. Not shouted. Not panicked. Just facts. Each number landed heavier than the last. The injuries were stacking up. Pike sat slumped against a support pillar, helmet discarded. Eyes glassy, but still present enough to nod when someone spoke to him. Moreno had his arm cinched tight, blood dark and tacky beneath the field dressing. Cross lay motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Each breath, thin, uneven, borrowed time. Ellison moved among them without drawing attention. She checked seals, pressure, circulation. She adjusted placements by inches that meant the difference between holding and losing ground, between minutes and seconds. When she finished, she drifted back to the shattered wall, rifle resting against broken concrete. Eyes never stopping their slow, deliberate sweep. Outside, the enemy shifted strategy. The constant volume of fire eased. Not silence, spacing. Short bursts now. Testing shots. probing rounds meant to bait movement, to force a mistake. They weren't trying to crush the team anymore. They were waiting. Ellison caught it instantly. She tilted her head slightly, listening past the noise, reading the empty space between shots. The pauses told a story. Where they hesitated, how long they waited, which angles stayed quiet too long. She spoke softly, not to the room, but to the fight itself. "They're watching the breach and the roofline," she said, "not the rear wall." Her voice was calm, clean, stripped of emotion. Not a suggestion, not a guess. Halverson shifted without a word, repositioning one of the shooters to cover the angle she named. He didn't ask why. Didn't look too raw for approval. The call made sense the moment it was spoken. Another burst cracked outside. It landed exactly where Ellison said it wouldn't. Seconds passed. Then another burst. Closer this time. "They're moving in pairs," she said. "One fires, one moves. They pause when they think we're reloading." Knox turned toward her sharply. "How do you know that?" he asked, the edge in his voice dulled now by something closer to need. Ellison didn't look at him, "Because that's how you bleed. Someone dry without losing men," she replied. The words hung in the dust-filled air. Raw heard it. He caught the phrasing. The structure. That wasn't how medics talked. That was how assault leaders explained things when they were teaching under fire. He didn't challenge her. Not yet. Instead, he adjusted his plan by a fraction so small no one else noticed. It aligned perfectly with what she had just said. Fire erupted again. Closer. Ellison raised one hand. Palm down, subtle, controlled. Halverson mirrored it instantly, pulling fire back for a heartbeat. The enemy rush came right on schedule. Fighters surged toward the broken wall, expecting to catch the team mid-reload. They didn't. The seals opened up in disciplined arcs, cutting the push apart before it could build momentum. Bodies dropped. Fire sputtered, confidence fractured. Ellison exhaled slowly. She moved again, shifted Pike 2 feet to the left, adjusting his line of sight to compensate for his injury. Placed Knox at a corner where his aggression could be focused instead of wasted. Nudged Cross just enough that incoming fire no longer traced the same lethal path across his body. Each adjustment was small. Together, they changed everything. Halverson followed every call. No hesitation now. His trust hardened with each correct read. He didn't praise her. Didn't question her. He simply executed the way senior enlisted always did when they recognized competence that didn't need explanation. Raw watched it unfold. He saw the way the team's breathing slowed when she spoke. How chaos sharpened into structure around her. How enemy pressure kept missing its mark. Still. No one asked her to explain herself. The mystery deepened. Ellison stayed balanced at the edge of the fight, shifting roles without ceremony. One moment, her hand rested briefly on Marino's shoulder, checking stability. The next, she was back at the wall, rifle-steady eyes locked onto a rooftop. Shadow that betrayed itself for half a second too long. One shot cracked. The shadow vanished. Knox swallowed hard. "They're not rushing anymore," he said quietly. "No," Ellison replied. "They're waiting for us to think we've stabilized." Silence settled, thick and unnatural. Outside, the probing fire stopped entirely. That was worse. Raw felt it settle heavy in his chest. Whatever came next would decide the night. He glanced at Ellison, searching her face for something confidence, fear. Anything loud, he found none of it, only focus. The enemy was learning, so were they. And somewhere between whispered ammo counts and the steady rhythm of Ellison's voice, the question no one wanted to ask grew sharper by the second. Who was she? No one asked, not yet. The next explosion came from inside the building, not distant. Not outside. Inside. The wall, to their right, shuddered, cracked, then collapsed in a violent roar of concrete and dust that slammed everyone to the floor. Cover turned into shrapnel. Certainty evaporated. A jagged opening tore into the room. Enemy fighters poured through immediately, no hesitation. No probing. Committed. Boots crunched over rubble. Silhouettes filled the breach. Weapons already up. The pause outside hadn't been doubt. It had been preparation. Raw shouted orders, his voice cutting through the chaos, but the room was already moving. The SEALs returned fire from every angle they could manage. Muzzle flashes lit the dust-choked air like lightning trapped indoors, then Knox went down. He was shifting position when a round tore through his thigh, spinning him sideways and slamming him into the floor. He shouted once, more anger than pain, and tried to drag himself behind cover. He COULDN, single quotes to blood spread fast beneath him, dark and slick against the concrete. His leg didn't answer. Another round shattered the pillar edge inches from his head, spraying stone into his face. His rifle slipped free, skidding across the floor, spinning once before coming to rest near the collapsed wall. Near Mara Ellison for a fraction of a second. The world narrowed. Ellison saw everything at once. The wounded stacked along the wall, crossfading, Moreno barely holding, Pike fighting through concussion, Knox exposed and bleeding. The breach still open, fighters pushing through in bursts. She saw angles, timing, flow. She also saw something else. The line she had been ordered not to cross 2 years ago. Written cleanly, stamped official. Medical only. No combat engagement except immediate self-defense. Reassigned, restricted. Watched, she had obeyed it. Right up until now, Ellison hesitated. Not from fear. From understanding exactly what picking up that rifle would mean after the shooting. Stopped. Then another fighter surged through the breach. Ellison reached for the rifle. The motion was smooth, unrushed, almost gentle against the violence around her. She brought it to her shoulder, settled her stance, and took half a breath. One shot. Center mass. Clean. Final. The fighter dropped without spectacle. Momentum carrying him forward into rubble. Ellison adjusted and fired. Again. Another precise shot. Another. Body fell. The room noticed. Not because she was shooting, because of how she was shooting. Her posture was wrong for a medic. Her cadence was wrong for panic. Her movements were economical, controlled, practiced, disciplined. She reloaded without ever looking down. Her eyes stayed locked on the breach, fingers working from memory instead of thought. Raw watched her for half a second too long. Ellison didn't look back. She stepped forward, taking a better angle, placing herself where she could track both the torn opening and the roofline beyond it. She raised her voice, just enough to cut through the noise. Knox, stay still, she said, pressure firm on the wound. Don't fight it. Her tone sliced through his panic cleanly. She fired again, then shifted left. Moreno, hold that corner. Pike 2 feet right. Cover the shadow on the roof edge. They moved instantly. No hesitation. No questions. The room changed. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. But unmistakably. The noise tightened. Fire became deliberate. Shouting stopped. Listening began. Ellison's voice threaded through the chaos, calm and exact. She called positions, timed reloads, predicted movement before it happened. They're coming in twos, she said. Second man hesitates. Take him when he leans. The hesitation came. The shot followed. The breach filled with bodies and broken momentum. Halverson realized he was beside her. Without remembering when he'd moved, he covered where she pointed. Shifted when she shifted. His trust was complete now, unquestioned. He didn't ask her rank. Didn't ask for authority. He recognized competence. Knox lay on the floor, teeth clenched, pain blurring his vision, watching Ellison fight like someone he had never actually seen before. Every joke he'd made echoed back at him now, empty and small. She moved to him between bursts of fire, dropped to one knee, and tightened the tourniquet another inch. A sound tore out of him before he could stop it. I know, she said quietly. Breathe, you're not done yet. She was back on her feet before he could respond. Another surge hit the breach. Heavier, louder, more desperate. Ellison adjusted instantly. Hold. Fire, she ordered. The SEALs froze, trusting her without fully understanding why. Wait. The enemy pushed harder. Sensing weakness, Then Ellison dropped the hammer. The ambush she built in seconds collapsed the rush before it could form. Bodies fell over bodies. The fighters broke, scattering as the cost became undeniable. Fire turned erratic. Confidence shattered. Ellison didn't pursue, she stepped back. Scanning, reading the aftermath like a language she'd spoken for years. They won't push like that again, she said. They'll try roof smoke. 2 minutes. Raw swallowed. How do you know? He asked. She glanced at him briefly. No pride. No defensiveness. Because that's what I do. The words landed hard. Raw nodded once and repositioned his men. He didn't challenge her. Didn't tell her to stand down. He needed her. The enemy adjusted exactly as she'd said. Smoke rolled in from the roofline, choking and blinding. Ellison called targets through it, firing on movement rather than shape. Her shots stayed measured, clean, controlled. When the push finally stalled, when the noise fell back into tense quiet, the room held its breath. Ellison lowered the rifle just enough to check ammo. Then moved back to Cross, kneeling beside him as if she had never left her medical role. She checked his pulse, adjusted fluids, leaned close enough to hear his breathing. Stay with me, she murmured. Just stay. Cross's fingers twitched. Knox watched it all, pain fading for a moment as understanding settled. Heavy in his chest. She hadn't become something else. She had always been this. Around them, faces shifted. No one laughed now. No one dismissed her presence. The respect wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. It lived in the way they watched her. In the way they waited for her next word. The mystery remained. Who she was. Where she learned this. Why she'd sat quietly in a chinook while they joked. Those questions hung unanswered. But one truth had settled. Solid and unavoidable. They were still alive because Mara Ellison had picked up the rifle. The gunfire thinned, fading into something distant and uncertain. Smoke drifted through the shattered room in slow grey sheets, carrying the sharp bite of burnt powder and concrete dust. The enemy had pulled back again, regrouping or reconsidering the cost. For the first time since the wall collapsed, no rounds cracked overhead. No voices echoed from the dark. The silence felt fragile. Raw lowered his rifle slightly, eyes still on the breach as his mind caught up. Men shifted positions, reloaded carefully, checked one another with quick looks that said everything words couldn't. Ellison knelt beside Cross, adjusting his line, checking his pulse again. Blood darkened her gloves. Dust clung to her uniform. Her rifle rested against the wall within reach. As natural to her now as her medical kit. ROR stepped closer. Not as a commander issuing orders, as a man who needed an answer. Who are you? He asked. His voice stayed calm, but the room tightened around the question. Every man within earshot went still. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. Ellison finished what she was doing before answering. She secured the line, checked Cross's breathing one last time, then stood and faced Raw. Staff Sergeant Mara Ellison, she said evenly. United States Army. Formerly assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment. 3rd Battalion. Assault Element. No one spoke. Raw didn't interrupt. 2 years ago, she continued, during a hostage recovery. I violated a hold order. Hostages were being executed. I made the call to move without clearance. Her voice didn't waver. No defensiveness. Just fact. We got them out alive, she said. The review board ruled my decision outside acceptable risk. I was reassigned to medical services with combat restrictions. She stopped there. No justification. No argument. Silence pressed in. Knox stared at the floor. Pike swallowed hard. Helverson's jaw tightened not with anger, but recognition. Raw held her gaze, reading what she hadn't said as clearly as what she had. You didn't apologize, he said quietly. Ellison met his eyes. I don't regret it, she said, and I won't pretend I do. No one challenged her. No one questioned her past, her rank, or her right to stand there with a rifle. Authority had shifted, not because she demanded it, but because her words carried lived consequence. Raw nodded once. Understood, he said. That was all. The answer wasn't written down. It wasn't transmitted over comms. It lived in his tone now, in the way he addressed her, not as support, not as an exception, but as someone whose judgment had already been proven under fire. Outside, shadows shifted beyond the breach. Ellison picked up her rifle without ceremony and moved back into position. The fight wasn't over, but the question of who she was no longer mattered. They knew the lull wouldn't last. Ellison stood at the edge of the broken wall, watching the night breathe. She wasn't listening for individual shots. Anymore, she was listening for intent. The enemy's rhythm had changed again. Slower spaced, conserving strength, waiting for hunger, blood loss, and exhaustion to finish what bullets hadn't. She turned to Raw. "They're setting containment," she said. 2 fire teams rotating. "Roofline overwatch every 90 seconds, Ellison said. "They expect us to wait." Raw nodded slowly. He didn't challenge the assessment. He didn't ask how she knew. The pattern fit everything they had just endured. "What do you see?" he asked. "A gap before dawn," Ellison replied. 15 minutes, maybe less. They relax when the light changes. Human nature. Raw drew in a breath and made the kind of decision that defined leadership under pressure. He kept command. He didn't give it up. But he stepped aside where it mattered most. "You plan it," he said. "I'll coordinate execution." Ellison didn't thank him. She knelt on the dust-coated floor and sketched the breakout with her finger. Lines and angles traced through debris. Movement element first. Wounded, covered from inside. Suppression timed to sound and shifting light. No wasted motion. No heroics. "I'll lead the movement," she said. Raw started to object, then stopped. The logic landed immediately. She read terrain better than anyone in the room. She moved clean. She didn't hesitate. Halverson met Rua's eyes and gave the smallest nod. Pradon crept in slowly. Night thinning into a grey that made shapes lie. Enemy fire slackened exactly when Ellison said it would. Men shifted positions. Voices drifted. Confidence softened into carelessness. "Now," Ellison whispered. She moved first. Low, controlled. Every step placed where shadow still lived. Halverson followed. Then Pike and Marino, spacing flawless despite injuries. They slipped through the collapsed sector. Rubble, crunching softly under boots that knew how to land. Ahead, a sentry stood half-turned, posture loose. Rifle hanging wrong, Ellison closed the distance without sound. Her hand came up. The blade flashed once fast. Final. She caught the body before it fell, lowering it into darkness. No noise. No second movement. They reached the tree line. Behind them, the rear element opened fire on schedule. The building erupted again in controlled chaos. The enemy responded instantly, pouring rounds into the structure they believed still held. Everyone. Ellison broke into a run. The valley detonated with sound as the deception was realized. Shouts rose. Fire chased them through branches and stone. Rounds snapping past. Ellison pushed the pace, guiding with hand signals, steering the wounded through uneven ground without slowing. Then the sound changed. A deep, rolling thunder cut through the firefight. Rotors.auh-60, Blackhawk dropped in low. Door guns already alive. Traces tore through enemy positions with brutal precision. Dust and debris whipped through the clearing as the aircraft flared into a hover. Ellison froze for half a second. The radio crackled. Movement element. "This is Guardian 2-1, the pilot called. We have you. Move now." The voice was female.com, such certain. Ellison recognized it instantly. "Anna Reese," she murmured. The radio answered before Raw could speak. "Ellison, that you?" Reese said. "I was hoping it was." The name landed harder than any blast. Ellison didn't smile. Didn't react at all. She just moved, driving the team forward as rounds stitched the ground behind them. They loaded fast. Hands grabbing straps. Bodies hauled inside. Door guns hammered back the enemy as they surged too late. Ellison turned once, scanning the tree line. Counting her people. All accounted for. She climbed aboard last. As the helicopter lifted. Fire chased them into the air, rounds snapping past the open doors. Reese pulled hard on the controls, banking away from the valley. Power climbing as the ground fell back into darkness. Inside the aircraft, no one spoke. Breaths came ragged, blood-smeared hands and gear. The rotors swallowed everything else. Ellison sat against the bulkhead, rifle across her lap, medical kit at her feet. She closed her eyes briefly, not in relief, but in release. Raw met her gaze across the cabin. There was no salute, no speech. Just a long, steady look of respect that didn't need words. They were alive. Everyone knew why the base was quiet in the way. Only places far from danger ever were. Concrete instead of rubble. Fluorescent lights instead of fire. Antiseptic and coffee replacing dust and cordite. Ellison felt the shift immediately. Adrenaline draining, leaving weight behind. The fight was over. The other battle was just beginning. The debrief room was small, windowless and unforgiving. Raw sat at the head of the table, uniform still marked by the valley. Halverson stood off to the side, arms crossed. Knox sat stiffly, leg-wrapped and elevated, jaw tight with pain and something closer to shame. Ellison stood when it was her turn. She didn't wait to be asked. "I violated my reassignment orders," she said calmly. "I engaged in direct combat and assumed tactical control during the engagement." She added no context, offered no defense, softened nothing. The room stayed silent. Raw spoke next. "Her actions saved my entire team," he said evenly, without hesitation, without recklessness, without ego. "Any report that omits that truth is incomplete." Halverson nodded once. "She did exactly what the situation required," he said, "and she accepted the risk of doing it." No one argued. Colonel Thomas Calder entered last. He listened without interruption, eyes on Ellison. Expression unreadable until the room finished speaking. "I was on the board that reassigned you," he said finally, "and I disagreed with it then." Ellison didn't react. "You were labeled aggressive," Calder continued. "Too willing to act without waiting for permission. What the board missed was intent. You weren't chasing action. You were refusing to watch people die while rules caught up." He slid a folder across the table. "Naval Special Warfare has requested dual-role authorization," Calder said. "Medic and assault qualified. Clear protocols. Defined command relationships. Accountability written in ink, not assumptions." Ellison opened the folder once. Closed it. "I'll accept the conditions," she said. No relief. No satisfaction. Just acceptance. Later, alone, she sat on her bunk and cleaned her rifle with the same care she gave her medical tools. Each movement deliberate. Each piece returned to order. 2 instruments. 1 purpose. Courage had never been about breaking rules to feel powerful. Real courage was knowing the rules, respecting the chain, and still being willing to carry the weight of a decision. When following orders would cost lives, Ellison hadn't acted for glory. She acted because someone had to, and when the cost came due, she paid it without flinching. She laid the rifle on the bench and finished wiping it down. Slow and careful, the way you treat something that's earned its place. Beside it, her medical kit sat open, restocked, precise. Every tool where it belonged, to roles. One mission, she didn't speak about the valley. She didn't need to. The men who passed her now did so more quietly, with a respect that didn't seek attention. Strength like hers was never loud. It lived in preparation, in restraint, in the willingness to carry responsibility without applause. Some heroes are easy to spot. Others sit quietly until the moment arrives and then do exactly what is required, no more, no less. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more true military and veteran stories of courage.